Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Max Chen, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of People in Transition. I am so looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, Bob.
Max, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you, and I'm using air quotes here, grew up?
I wanted to be a cop, from what I remember.
And what were the transition moments that you've gone through to get you from that picture of yourself as a cop to where you're at today?
When you're younger in, let's say, elementary school, teachers always ask you what you want to be when you grow up, right? And it's usually the popular roles, if you want to call it that. So there's the policeman, firefighter, astronaut, those type of roles, teacher, doctor. So I just picked one of the popular ones, policeman, because I like to help people and serve people at that point. So that's why I decided to go with the policeman at that point. Obviously, I didn't know all the educational training that had to be involved in it. However, as I got older, went into high school, then I started to think about a legitimate career that I would actually pursue at that point. So I was always thought I was good with numbers, and I took some business classes. One specifically was in accounting, and then I took accounting. I did really well in accounting in high school, and I thought maybe I could be an accountant once I go to university and graduate. What I didn't know was that the accounting courses that I took in high school were more focused on bookkeeping, not necessarily accounting. And then when I actually took accounting courses in university, I realized that this is not what I was expecting. There's a lot of analysis and case studies compared to doing debits and credits, which was more bookkeeping focused. So at that point, I knew that wasn't really for me. So I wanted to do something else. I always had a passion for business, so I knew I wanted to stay in the realm of business. I did some research and I thought that marketing would be the right avenue for me because I like growing businesses, how to acquire customers, generate revenue, etc. So that was something that I wanted to pursue further. During my last year of university, I ended up taking a marketing certification course and combined with my bachelor's of psychology, because I did move from accounting to a bachelor's in psychology and then did a certification in marketing. Once I had both those done, I started applying and then I ended up getting my first marketing job. It took me about 11 months, but I was able to get my first marketing job as a marketing assistant at a local digital marketing agency. I went there for about 4 to 5 years, and then I moved on to a corporate company in Canada in the telecommunications industry, where I was still doing marketing. And then from a career coaching perspective, which is why you invited me today, Bob, is what happened was during COVID, there was a lot of shutdowns and people getting laid off. And there was this gentleman on LinkedIn that made a post about asking for professionals who are willing to donate their time to help people in need who got laid off. So I signed up and did free resume reviews for a handful of people. And some of these people I kept in touch with, and they ended up getting new opportunities. So at that point, I said, okay, if I can give these people the results they're looking for, maybe I can turn this into a business. Now we fast forward a couple of years later, I started building my brand on LinkedIn, had my own podcast, starting to do videos on TikTok or Instagram. And by building that brand and career coaching, that's what I'm doing right now as a passion of mine.
That's great, Max. Thank you for that. You've certainly written and reviewed just hundreds of resumes over the years. And I know that we've talked a bit in terms of some of your thoughts about resumes and what makes an effective resume. And I'd like to get your thoughts on a few items. Let's say that you've been out of school for, 2, maybe 3 years. Where do you put your education section? Where do you put your experience section? How do you format that resume?
Yes, that's a great question. When you are a recent grad, you have a lot of educational focused content on your resume. For example, your education, your GPA, what courses you took, key projects, extracurriculars. But as you mentioned, as you have 2 to 3 years of experience, you really have to limit the amount of educational content you have and focus more on your work experience. Because once you have 2 to 3 years, you should have a fair amount of accomplishments that you can put on your resume, showcasing the work experience that you have gained. So with that being said, once you have those 2 or 3 years of experience, you would put your education at the bottom below the professional work experience. So how I usually do my resumes is you have your content information at the top, then you have your executive summary, which is 4 to 5 lines providing an overview of your experience. Then you have your professional work experience. Then you have your education. And then if you like, you can have a skills section at the bottom for keyword-rich skills that you would think would be relevant for the role you're trying to apply for. So that's what, my opinion, a standard format for a resume for a professional that has 2 to 3 years of work experience.
Max, you said that out of school, it took you 11 months or so to find your first job. Was your first resume well constructed? If you really did a good job of debriefing and asking yourself about that first resume, what would you say?
I kind of cheated with that because I didn't write my first one. I actually hired a career coach and she helped me write the resume. And how she did it was, again, content information at the top, and then she did an executive summary, and then she put the education with all the coursework. Then she put my internship experience at the bottom at that point. So that's how it was formatted. For me, as a recent grad, that was a good formatted resume because I did not have a lot of experience. So I had to leverage my educational experience and showcase what I did in school and then complement that with the internship experience that I did have. The resume did work well. The reason why it took so long was I was very bad in interviews. I kept on messing up for whatever reason. And then I got the same career coach to help me with interview prep. And then at that point, I got a job. The one thing I want to emphasize to all the listeners that you have is that the resume gets you in the door, but if you don't get the job, that's when it becomes a communication problem. Too many professionals, if they don't get the job, they think that there's something wrong with their resume. So they're tweaking a resume that already works. What they should be focusing on is their communication skills. So if you're getting interviews with your resume, but you're not getting the job offer, at that point, you have to focus on the communication skills, and that will put you over the top.
You've mentioned to me before that generic soft skills like excellent communication or strong leadership or a team player don't add value to a resume. And I would say that 70% of the resumes I see have that. Why doesn't that add value?
It doesn't add value because it's not really telling them much, right? They'll know if you're an excellent communicator based off how you write the resume and the accomplishments that you've added onto your resume. For example, if you're talking about collaboration, they already know that you will be a good communicator. If you talk about delegation, if you talk about leading, there's a lot of communication components already just by using those words. If you just say you're an excellent communicator, it doesn't really give any value because like everybody can say that. Everybody can say they're a team player, right? But there's a difference between showcasing it in your bullet points, and a good recruiter will know if you have good teamwork skills just based off how you write your bullet points compared to just plugging it into the bottom of a resume and highlighting as a skill.
And then on the flip side of that is having those quantifiable metrics. What does that mean, and how should you use that in your resume?
Yes, so I reviewed, as you already mentioned, hundreds of resumes. The ones that don't stand out at all are the ones that only have words. There's no numbers. When you just have words on a page, it just looks like a novel, right? There's nothing that really stands out. But as soon as you start adding and sprinkling those numbers, whether it's percentages, dollars, or just general numbers, the recruiter is going to, just based off the fact that the numbers are fewer than the words, they will actually focus more on those numbers right away compared to just having a bunch of words, because then they have to find the information compared to having numbers on your resume, which makes them automatically focus on those areas of the resume. So that's why it's so important to have quantifiable metrics just to help your resume stand out and really highlight the impact that you have provided for all the companies that you have worked for, that you have highlighted on your resume.
Max, can you describe to our listeners what an applicant tracking system is, and how do you get your resume set up so that it is most effective working through that applicant tracking system?
So I have a recruiter friend, and he made a good analogy of what the applicant tracking system, or ATS, is. It's basically a CRM for recruiters. So for those who don't know, CRM, for example, Salesforce, is a customer relationship management system where it houses all the information of customers and potential customers, such as prospects. So on the HR side of things, the ATS for recruiters is more of a CRM, which is a filing cabinet for all the candidates that are applied to the postings that they manage. So that's what the ATS is for. There's also like different tools to help you, such as like grading the resumes based off the different keywords that the recruiter is focusing on. But overall, it is just a filing cabinet for resumes. Every recruiter that I've talked to have stated that they've looked at every resume that has been submitted. So for people who think that the ATS automatically rejects you, unless there's like, for example, there's knockout questions like, do you need sponsorship? Recruiters will look at your resume. The ATS is just a filing cabinet. Now, to make it easier for the ATS to read your resume, I always recommend a plain, simple document. For example, like black text on a white background. You can have the headings a different color just to make it pop a little bit, but I wouldn't go over the top with the creative. I know a lot of professionals may want to use Canva resume with fancy designs, but that's going to make it harder for the ATS to scan the resume. Again, the recruiter is mainly looking for the written content of a resume. So you want to make it easy for the ATS system to scan it and then give the correct information to the recruiter so they can make correct evaluation of your expertise and skills to see if you'd be a good fit to move forward in their application process.
Max, how do you talk about the gaps that you might have in your resume? And do you think companies today are more or less open to consider a candidate who has gaps in their work experience?
One trick I use for some of my clients, if they do have gaps on the resume, is I don't put the months, I just put the years. So if you had like a gap of 5 months, you just remove the months, there's no gap, right? Yes, there might be some debate with recruiters saying that's not ethical, but I've used it for all my clients and they all get interviews. So obviously it does work. Again, I always say that a resume is not a legal document, it's a marketing document to highlight experience. So position your content the way you see fit and makes you the most attractive. That's one way to address a resume gap that's in between your roles. If you are not working right now, so let's say you got laid off for whatever reason in 2022, if the gap's a year or less, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think, in my opinion, employers are more understanding of career gaps or resume gaps, especially with what happened with COVID when everything got shut down and a lot of people got laid off. There was this one person that I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and she worked in the tourism industry. And when she was applying for jobs, the hiring manager told her straight out, okay, I know you were in the tourism industry, so you know what happened there. I completely understand. So we're not going to dive into that. Let's talk more about your work experience, right? So yes, I think companies and hiring managers are more understanding about layoffs and resume gaps. And then, as you know, Bob, Meta laid off about 11,000 people, and that's a big company, right? And you can't say that 11,000 people got laid off due to performance. I think there was one story on LinkedIn where the guy worked for 2 days and got laid off, right? So you can't be that bad of a performer in 2 days to get fired. So again, I think a lot of people are more understandable with layoffs, with what's going on in tech and what happened with COVID a couple of years ago.
And Max, what about references? How do you do that section in your resume?
Yeah, so if you follow a lot of career coaches on LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram, they all advise you not to put references upon request. And I agree with that. It's not necessary. I always say if they want you to work for them, if they want to offer you the job, they'll ask for your references. So I rather use that one line of references upon request for like skill section or even adding your interest just to personalize your candidacy. But I don't think it's necessary to have references upon request at the bottom of your resume.
Max, let's say you've got a great resume set up and now I'm ready to start utilizing it. How do you build a relationship with people inside a company that you're interested in? And having that relationship with those people, how does that help you in your recruiting process?
There's two ways to get a job, right? You can apply completely cold or you get a referral. Referral will be a bit easier, especially at a more competitive company, because what's the one thing a manager says if they need someone? They'll basically say, hey guys, I have an opening on my team. As you may be aware, let me know if you know anybody that would be a good fit for the role. So at that point, if you have done your proper networking and you reach out to the right person, they may reach out to you, say, hey, my manager just said that there's an opening. Are you interested? I can refer you in, right? That's the importance of networking. Networking works in a couple ways. The first is giving you information about the company and role. A lot of people like the big brand names, but if you network with people at the brand name companies and realize that, hey, this is not actually what I was thinking of in my next career move, you save yourself tons of time and headache. So that's a good way to get information is through networking or informational interview. The second benefit, again, is by building relationships through informational interviews. If you made a good impression with one of the people you've contacted, they might be able to refer you for an opening if they know the hiring manager, right? Again, it's way easier for someone else to vouch for you to get an interview than you applying completely cold where nobody knows you, right? So the more people that know you within a certain team in the company, the more likely they are going to give you a shot of interviewing for the position. The one thing I want to stress is that a referral is not a guaranteed job offer. I've heard stories of how current employees invited referrals because they knew someone that had an opening, and these people did not take the interview seriously for whatever reason, and the hiring manager didn't hire them, right? They're actually very disappointed it was such a bad referral. And that's also an important thing to emphasize is that when someone refers you, they're putting their reputation on the line. So if you're not taking it seriously, they'll never refer you again. They understand that, again, the hiring manager might not be looking for your type of skill set, but if you completely bomb it or don't try in the interview at all, they're going to see that as a lack of respect and they will have no intention of ever referring you to a role again. So that's very important when it comes to relationship building. But just to summarize this point, I definitely recommend when it comes to a job search to apply online and to network. So I would say if you are currently working right now, to try to connect to maybe a few people a week, and then again, look at the job board, see what interests you, and then apply to a few a week as well. And then over time, as you compound the amount of people you reach out to and the jobs you apply to, you'll start getting the traction you're looking for after a few weeks to a month. Because you've built up so many touch points with multiple people and multiple jobs.
So, Max, let's say that I'm fairly new, again, 2-3 years into my career, and I really don't have that many contacts to network with. How do I go about growing that list?
I didn't actually know that many people either when I was moving from digital marketing at the agency to telecom. I think LinkedIn's a great equalizer. So if you don't have a warm network you can leverage, reaching out to people on LinkedIn cold is probably the best and easiest way. Obviously, it is still a numbers game to a certain extent because not everybody's going to respond to you. From my experience networking, I've had people ignore my connection request. I've had people accept my connection request, and then when I send a message, they don't say anything. And I have people that I message and they say, oh, sorry, I don't actually have time right now, right? So they added me and then they said no. Again, I don't know why I did that, but there is going to be a lot of rejection and ghosting when you network cold, but you will get a handful of people that are willing to talk to you because, again, people do want to help. And also, as a bonus, if you are trying to get into a bigger company, they do have referral bonuses. So there is incentive on the other side to refer you in for an interview and potentially you get a job there because then they could get a small bonus on top of their salary to help them out financially, right? So don't be shy in regards to reaching out to people cold, because there is a benefit for you, as you know, but also benefit for them from both a financial and even a personal perspective, because they might not be able to get the opportunity to share their story a lot, right? That's why I always say when it comes to networking, you have to be authentically curious and interested in what this person has achieved in their career, because people know when you reach out to them that you're looking for a job, right? But you have to do it in a way that feels authentic. So if you're curious, engaging, having a good conversation, they're more likely to help you out compared to just reaching out and saying, hey, can you review my resume? Oh, hey, do you know who is the hiring manager for this position? Definitely, again, it is a long game, but if you go in with authentic and good intentions, you will get the result you're looking for.
Max, why would you coach your candidate to ensure that they thoroughly review the job description of the position they're interviewing for before they go into that interview? Why is that useful?
It's useful because you're going to have a good idea of what they're going to ask. For example, let's say you're in project management and one of the requirements is that you need to know agile methodologies, or you need to have 5 years of experience in software development lifecycle. If they're looking for those, you better have a story prepared to share when it comes to those types of questions, right? If you're marketing, if they say they're looking for someone that has Google advertising experience, you better have a story ready to talk about your Google advertising experience. That's why it's so important to go through the job ad, because a lot of the technical questions you can pull from the job ad. A great way to do this is like if you go through the bullet points and you ask yourself, if I turn this into an interview question, how would it sound like? So for example, going back to the marketing example of the Google Ads experience, they say looking for someone to manage Google Ads campaigns. The way you could spin that into a question would be, walk me through how you would create a new Google Ads campaign for a tourism client. So that showcases the knowledge that you'll need to address if they ask you a question about Google Ads. Again, if you want to really cover your bases, go through the job ad and see what the technical aspects are required, and then try to turn them into questions. And then you can Google top behavioral questions, and then that would cover your bases. It'll cover the technical side that they're looking for, and also cover the soft skills side as well.
Max, if you apply for multiple different positions within the same company, is that a plus or a minus to the company's talent acquisition team that they see that you have done that?
It depends. If you're applying to like 5 jobs at the same company, then that's a bit overboard. If you apply to 2, then it's okay, as long as they're similar in scope. Because I've worked with professionals where they interview for one position, the hiring manager said they don't think they're a good fit, they're a better fit somewhere else. They'll end up getting them to interview for that position, right? With that being said, it's okay to apply to 2 jobs if they're interested and you're qualified. Obviously, you will have to be upfront if, for example, you are deep into the interview process of one position, but then you had already applied to another position and then they're starting that process. Obviously, the hiring managers are going to talk to each other and they're going to find out. So you do have to be transparent if you are applying for multiple positions and you have been selected in the interview process for multiple positions.
Which kind of leads me to my next question. What if let's just say that you're in midpoint of your career and you applied at a company that you really want to work at, and the position that you are applying for is a much more junior level position, and you're really willing to take that lower role because you want to get your foot in the door. How do you think that's viewed by the talent acquisition team? How can you sell that notion to them?
It's definitely tough. If you are applying to a lower role, the recruiter right away is going to think that you'll be a flight risk. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you make $100,000 and you apply to a lesser role that makes 80. It's going to be a red flag right away, because then it's like, first off, if it's a role that's a lower role with lots of responsibilities, they might think you'll get bored easy. Second is, like, if you go a bit lower, the salary is not going to be as high. So once the economy picks up, for example, and you apply to another job that gives you the salary you want, you'll jump ship, right? So I think overall, it is a harder sell to apply to a lower role in regards to the lower salary, potential boredom. Those two things tend to make recruiters uneasy because you could be a potential flight risk. Now, that's not to say that's impossible. You have to tell a good story in terms of like why you're looking to downgrade, so to speak. A perfect example is, let's say you are a people manager and you're managing people, but you're just done with managing people because you've done it for 10 to 15 years. You wanted to go back to an individual contributor role. If you highlight in your cover letter and in the interview saying that, yes, I understand that this is an individual contributor role, but I'm looking to go away from managing people and focus more on being an individual contributor. This is where I want to go in my career now. As long as you sell it in a proper way, the recruiter will give a look at you. And also go back to the networking aspect. You can talk to like various people and say, hey, I'm looking to get back down to an individual contributor role. What's your thoughts on that, right? So again, I think initially it will be hard, but if you sell your story and position the transition in a proper way that actually connects with the recruiter and hiring manager, that should help you go to a lower role if you choose to do so.
Max, how do you coach your clients on how to handle that question? What is the compensation level you're looking for?
There's a few ways to answer this question. The first is do your research and just ask for a range. I always say do a 10K range if you're, let's say, doing a specialist or first level manager role. If it's more, again, director or VP, then you can widen the range a bit because VP director salaries are a bit wider in scope based off the industry. So do your research and do a proper range. Again, like the quickest way would be to look at job sites and salary sites, just as PayScale, Glassdoor. Again, they might not be 100% accurate, but we'll give you a ballpark. The other way is do some informational interviews. Again, collecting data and just say, hey, I'm looking to interview for these types of positions, and this is the salary range I'm looking for. What are your thoughts, right? And then they'll tell you. So that's the other way to do it if you want to go above and beyond and get research through conversations. So that's one way to do it, is just bring up the salary range. The second way is obviously asking the recruiter what the budget is. Again, sometimes the recruiter will push back and not give you the number. Again, it's always those games, but some recruiters will just straight up tell you, right? Because again, they don't want to waste your time if it's not the right salary range for you. A good recruiter will give you the salary if you ask, and not play the back and forth. The third way to dodge the question is just stating that you can't give a proper number right now because you don't know too much about the role yet. So you can't give an accurate compensation range. However, you want to move this conversation at a later date once you get more information about the role. And so far you like what you hear, and there shouldn't be any issue to coming to an agreement between us for me to work here at this company, right? So those are three ways. So the first way, again, is to just give a salary range. Also say that you're open to negotiation. So if there's other things that they could throw at you to sweeten the pot in the compensation, that's always a good way to go if you want to go the salary range route. The second way is ask for the budget. And then the third way is to delay the conversation at a later date. Again, those two might not work. The recruiter might just push back and just want you to give a number right then and there. At that point, you would have to give a salary range at that time. So even though you may not want to give the salary range right away, you do want to have a number in mind in case the recruiter pushes back in the initial call.
Max, any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who's going through their own personal transition?
I think if you like listening to podcasts, like Bob's podcast here, I have my own podcast, Chan with a Plan. That's a career-focused podcast. Another popular one is, I believe it's called Finding Your Dream Job. That's from Mac Pritchard, Maxless. That's a popular one. Another one is Career GPS. That one is pretty popular as well. So those are three podcasts that would be of interest for anybody who wants to listen for more career content. And then there's a lot of LinkedIn content creators out there to help with the job search. There's, for example, there's Madeline Mann, Austin Belsack, Randall Perry. Those are a few ones that come top of mind. So those are some resources there. And then in terms of like websites, there's, I believe it's called themuse.com. There's Balanced Careers. Those are a couple there too. JobScan, they have resume optimizers. Again, take that with a grain of salt. It does help you, but don't try to like get a 99% score because then it's almost like keyword stuffing. So be careful with that. Those are some of the online resources you can take a look at if you want to get better direction and content to make your resume and job search stronger.
Max, if our listeners only remember three things to be more successful in finding their next great job opportunity, what are those three things you want them to remember?
The first is know your audience. Many people write the resume for themselves, but not for the audience. So if you're trying to transition to a different industry or role, take a look at a few job ads for that specific role and then see what are some of the responsibilities they're looking for that I've done and put that into your resume, because you want to try to align yourself as close as possible, even though you're trying to make a career change. So that's number one. Number two, again, if you are applying to jobs and you're getting interviews, your resume is working. If you are getting interviews, but you're not getting the job offer, then your communication is the issue. So a lot of professionals, they always go back to the resume, even if they get multiple interviews, because they think the resume problem, but it's an interview problem. So again, if you don't get interviews, then it's a resume problem. If you don't get the job, then it's a communication problem. That's the second thing I want to emphasize. And then the third thing is that there's multiple ways to approach a job search. Some career coaches emphasize about networking and don't apply online as a waste of time. But for me, I think like you have to do what works for you. There's a lot of content creators out there in the career coaching space. They'll tell you a whole bunch of things. My best advice is just take a look at the advice, see what resonates with you, try different things. Some things might work, some things might not, but you're not going to get the results you want by just reading a bunch of information. Take these people's information, try it out, see what works, and then double down on the stuff that does work. And again, be patient with your job search. All this career coaching advice is good, but it still takes time to apply it to get the result you want. So for me, when I was transitioning from digital marketing to telecom, there was so much emphasis on networking, but it still took me 6 months to get to that opportunity. When I was a recent grad, I had a great resume, but I was not communicating effectively during the interview. So that was also a learning lesson that I had to endure. With that being said, again, the job search, you got to be patient, you got to be disciplined and keep applying the principles you've learned. And then over time, you'll get the result you're looking for. Too many people want to get a job overnight. And with how competitive it is, they have to stay patient and you have to keep following the process. And the ones that stick it out tend to be the one that get the results.
Max Chan, I want to thank you for a great session today. I have done this for lots of years, and I've made a number of notes here of some of your tips and techniques. So thank you very much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Bob. Again, I really appreciate you inviting me, and hope this episode, this conversation we had, will be of great value to your listeners as they look to make a career change.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully, or without too many battle scars, survive their own obstacle courses, and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.